of Matthew Lap Train Guy segment show. Also, today in this segment, I'm at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado. The Colorado Railroad Museum is located on 17155 West 4th Avenue in Golden, Colorado. The museum is open 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 7 days a week and even closed on major holidays such as Thanksgiving, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, and even closed when there's a bad snowstorm. And the Colorado Railroad Museum has a variety of trains, locomotives, rolling stock, narrow gauge, and standard gauge locomotives in rolling stock that are from railroads mostly from Denver and Rio Grande, and others include Colorado and Southern, Georgetown, Breckenridge, and Leadville, Union Pacific, and many others you'll see. The Colorado Railroad Museum even features smaller exhibits, a model railroad found in the basement of the train depot, where the visitor center and gift shop is, where we enter to the museum grounds. Also, the Colorado Railroad Museum even features a garden railway as well. Also, the Colorado Railroad Museum has been established in 1959. The Colorado Railroad Museum is also like a place that is known to be a place to lose track of time. Two men dedicated themselves to preserving Colorado Railroad history and saved some railroad pieces that helped build Colorado from the torch. Cornelius W. Howe and Robert W. Richardson opened the Colorado Railroad Museum in 1959. Also, the Colorado Railroad Museum has set up a narrow gauge line around the museum grounds to have train rides giving visitors rides around the museum grounds, and the train rides are mostly given on Saturdays throughout the year. And to find out more about the train rides, please do check the web for more information. Okay, you can see right here, this is a switch stand. This kind of switch you can see is you have to pull it to switch like this to switch the tracks. And also, it is locked in. I wish I could move it back for you, but unfortunately can't since it's locked, as you can see. And also, it is displayed on this side. This one is displayed on this side of the depot here at the Colorado Railroad Museum. Here two are just like it, and these are just moving plants, cactuses, and also they are also locked in place as well. Just a nice decoration of railroad memorial they're used for here at the museum. What you see right behind me is the train depot. This train depot is a replica train depot from the 1800s and is the main depot of the museum. The depot was dedicated in 2000. It is a composite of what a late 19th century railroad would put up at a small division point. It also houses a collection of rare photographs, artifacts, and documents, as well as model cars and locomotives, and a reconstructed telegrapher's office staffed by a mannequin. Also, inside the depots you enter, it has the admission counter and a gift shop. Also has a model railroad and some exhibits downstairs in the basement as well. What you see right behind me is Rio Grande Southern 0404. Rio Grande Southern 0404 was built by the Rio Grande Southern Railroad in 1902 and is a narrow gauge off-center cupola caboose. Rio Grande Southern 0404 was used on freight trains on the Rio Grande Southern Railroad and was also used as the train crew's office aboard the train crew when going from place to place when it was used. Rio Grande Southern 0404 was part of the last freight trains to run on the Rio Grande Southern Railroad. Then Rio Grande Southern 0404 came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today. What you see right behind me is Rio Grande Southern 1789. Rio Grande Southern 1789 was built by Farrell in 1887 and is a bunk car. Rio Grande Southern 1789 was originally used for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and was originally numbered as Denver and Rio Grande 3373. This car was one of the 371 boxcars to come to the Rio Grande Southern, which renumbered it as Rio Grande Southern 1789. In 1903, the Rio Grande Southern converted the car to automatic brakes and installed automatic couplers. It is interesting to note that the car still has its split brake system, which is almost non-existent today on the narrow gauge. In 1905, the car was taken out of revenue service and rebuilt as a bunk car. Rio Grande Southern 1789 was rescheduled for scrapping on several occasions, but in every instance was saved by a sudden need. In its later years, it was used by the man responsible for maintaining the railroad's water towers. In 1989, Rio Grande Southern 1789 was restored and also came to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 3050. Denver and Rio Grande 3050 was built by the Denver and Rio Grande shops in 1941 and is a narrow gauge flat car. Denver and Rio Grande 3050 was also used as a maintenance of way flat car and has two knuckles, one for narrow gauge equipment and one for standard gauge equipment, and is basically used for connecting to trains in narrow or standard gauge. Denver and Rio Grande 3050 later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it can be seen today, and sometimes it can be seen moving around. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 60. Denver and Rio Grande 60 was built in 1881 and is a narrow gauge railway post office car. Denver and Rio Grande 60 was once used for having mail inside being sorted out whenever it was used on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad on passenger trains many years ago. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 60 was used and hauled around Colorado on the Denver and Rio Grande narrow gauge line into towns such as Salida, Gunnison, Montrose, Durango, and Alamosa from 1889 to 1951. Then later on, Denver and Rio Grande 60 came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today, and sometimes it's just stationary or sometimes it is used on the train sets and still preserved at the museum today. And what I mean by train sets is that sometimes it's hauled around the museum grounds during rides. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 683. Denver and Rio Grande 683 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1890 and is the 11,207th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 280 consolidation type steam locomotive and is a C28 class steam locomotive. Denver and Rio Grande 683 was once used on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and was originally numbered as 583. In 1924, the locomotive was renumbered as Denver and Rio Grande 683, which it is presently. Then in 1947, it was sold to the San Luis Valley Southern Railway Company and numbered as 106 in Blanca, Colorado. In 1955, Denver and Rio Grande 683 had been retired and sat idle in an abandoned engine house for several years. Then in 1963 was moved to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today, and it used to stand by the depot with 2 green coaches. And if you ever saw a picture of it on the internet with green coaches and pictures shown next to the depot, you could say it looks like the locomotive is pulling into the station with the passenger train. And that's what I think also. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 683's other tender is currently in storage in Denver, Colorado. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 683 was nearly scrapped, but escaped the torch and still survives today. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 683's tender with the number 583 is in a storage yard in Denver, Colorado somewhere. And the tender it presently has is its 1920s tender when it was numbered 683, which it is presently. And also, Denver and Rio Grande 683 is the only remaining standard gauge Denver and Rio Grande steam engine left in the world today, and of all the surviving Denver and Rio Grande 280 surviving today, the other 9 are all narrow gauge. And also, 683's cab was open to the public when it stood next to the depot. I'm unsure if it is still open, but I guess so, but I'm not sure. And I think you can also go inside the cab and ring the locomotive's bell, but I'm not sure about that at this point. I'd have to check. That would be really a good idea to see if it is okay, even if you are really concerned about it. But I don't think there seems to be a problem with going in the cab. It looks fine, though. And that's how it's done. Okay, I'm going to show you the exhibits in the basement, so I'll get behind the camera and show you around. So here we go. Alright, so we're walking down to the exhibit basement, and you can see that is an M10000, that painting. So here we are going down in the exhibits, and you can see that's a cutaway of it. It looks like a Lego Denver and Rio Grande car. Yeah, and look, as you could see, a lot has changed since I've been here in 2013. I think this looks like, it says right here, Union Pacific Diner 3600. And here's a Velocipede. And here's a Golden Rio Grande Southern locomotive. This is the 491, which is here at the museum. That's an HO model. And that's the Breckenridge locomotive. You don't see much of these days. And this is a Galloping Goose, number 6. And also, oh, let's see what's back here. Here, lanterns. Wow. Yep, it's a play area. Here's some oiling cans. Yeah. That's home of the Galloping Goose, it says there. Rio Grande and Western Scenic Limited. And also, here's some uniforms. And yeah, so much to see in here. Okay, I'm going to show you the HO Model Railroad here. That's run by Model Railroad Club, so I'll get behind the camera and walk around. So here we go. So we're going to start over here. So as you can see, this looks like railroad tracks going through a street next to old style buildings that you see in Old West days. And yeah, there's a water tower, a Denver and Rio Grande water tower. Look at all this. Isn't this pretty cool? Looks kind of like what Colorado was like in the old days. Wow, Union Pacific freight train and a caboose, diesel. And also, here's a trestle bridge. Bruce and Trestle Bridge. If the pronunciation's incorrect, please let me know. And look, there's some Denver and Rio Grande steam engines. And that looks like the California Zephyr. It says here, insert 25 to run the train. Wow. And the California Zephyr ran on the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, Denver and Rio Grande, and Western Pacific, as you could see. And that looks like the Union Pacific 119 right there, which it is. And that's the DeWitt Clinton. There's a replica of the one at the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. And that's an N-gauge Southern Pacific diesel right there. And this is a drive-in movie theater, as you could see. And they play Thomas the Tank Engine. And they have DVDs as played on that screen you see right there. And it's like these cars are seeing Thomas the Tank Engine. And let's walk along this wall. These are some old pictures of the Model Railroad Club, and here's some old Lionel advertisements. And wow, look at all these. This is Mexican Railroad, and yeah, look at all that cool stuff. Ferrocarril de El Salvador. Wow, cool. And look at all these cool pictures they have here in these frames of the old days. That looks like the Wind Splitter. Denver, Laramie, Northwestern. Wow. Built in my hometown, Omaha, Nebraska. The Wind Splitter, it looks like. And here's a Denver and Rio Grande Streamline diesel and articulated loco hauling train, as well as an observation car on a passenger train. And look at these comics right here. Aren't they interesting? Yeah. Here's Missouri Pacific passenger train photos. As you can see, a lot of things. Like ticket, envelope, and such. And look in this case. There's some HO trains. Here's a Challenger, and here's some Streamline diesels and Western Atlantic steam engine. And look at these, pretty cool. Here's an Aero train up here, and wow, pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to show you the exhibits around in here, so I'll get behind the camera and show you around. walk around. So here we go. So here we go, walking around in here. This area of the depot. There's an old style switch control thing. A large scale Bachmann Rio Grande Southern steamer. Number 25. And a caboose number 507. And here's some trains that pretty small that you can ride. A Denver and Rio Grande articulated loco, as well as a caboose number 1438, steam engine 3712. This is a model of the big boy number 4019, which you don't see today. And here's a Union Pacific caboose 25069. And down here, here's a model of the 844, which is ran by Union Pacific steam fleet. Steam operations, I should say. Heritage operations. What the heck? Here's a switch stand. And here's a headlight and a number plate from a Denver and Rio Grande. If you want to read that, you can. So feel free to pause. And here's the builder's plate right here of it. Look at all this. Pretty cool stuff in here. Wow. Colorado Midland steam engine number 9. Here's a bell and a whistle. Rio Grande Southern 20. And here's the cutout of it. Excuse me. And here's a painting of the engine and some plates as well. And the lantern. Yeah, if you want to ever know about the history, you could even lift those flaps up. And here's a large scale model Colorado and Southern 60, which is in the state of Colorado. And this is a model Denver and Rio Grande Western 284, which is one of the passenger cars carried around at the museum. And here are more flaps, conductor's hat, and lantern. Yeah, pretty cool. You see right behind is Colorado and Northwestern 30. Colorado and Northwestern 30 was built by the Brooks Locomotive Works, Alco Brooks in Dunkirk, New York in 1898, and is the 2951st steam locomotive built by that factory, and is a 280 consolidation type steam locomotive, and is a B4F class steam locomotive. Colorado and Northwestern 30 was built for the Colorado Northwestern Railway in Boulder, Colorado. Then in 1909, the locomotive was sold to the Denver, Boulder, and Western Railroad as Denver, Boulder, and Western 30. Then in 1919, the locomotive was sold to Morse Brothers Machinery and Supply in Denver, Colorado. Then in 1921, the locomotive was sold to the Colorado and Southern Railway and numbered it and given the road name as Colorado and Southern 30. Then in 1945, it was sold back to the Morse Brothers Machinery and Supply in Denver, Colorado. Then in 1949 was sold to the Rio Grande Southern Railroad as Rio Grande Southern 74. Later, the locomotive was retired, then sold to the city of Boulder, Colorado in 1952. The locomotive also went back to its original number and road name as Colorado Northwestern 30 and was cosmetically restored in Denver, Colorado in 2012. After a cosmetic restoration, Colorado Northwestern 30 was leased to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and started in 2014. The locomotive was put next to the train depot and has the cab open for display, and Colorado in Northwestern 30 is like a sole survivor of any Colorado Northwestern steam engines built, and can still be seen here at the Colorado Railroad Museum, and you can even visit the engine's cab as well, and even sit where the engineer and fireman used to sit, and even ring the locomotive's bell. And that's how it's done. You see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 04255. Denver and Rio Grande 04255 was built by the Denver and Rio Grande shops in 1898 and is a maintenance of way kitchen car. Denver and Rio Grande 04255 looks just like a boxcar, and that's what it originally was when it was built, and it also was then converted into a kitchen car in 1914 for the Denver and Rio Grande maintenance of way. Then later Denver and Rio Grande 04255 was then later retired and then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Union Pacific 5442. Union Pacific 5442 was built by the Pullman Company in 1950 and is a passenger car. Union Pacific 5442 was once used on the Union Pacific famous city trains such as the City of Los Angeles, City of San Francisco, City of Portland, and City of Denver. Union Pacific 5442 had passengers ride on aboard when going from place to place, when being hauled around. Then later Union Pacific 5442 was retired and then came to be on static display at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Union Pacific 4801. Union Pacific 4801 was built by the American Car and Foundry Company in St. Charles, Missouri in 1949 and is a dining car. Union Pacific 4801 was used on the passenger trains such as City of LA and City of San Francisco, City of Portland, City of Denver. Union Pacific 4801 also featured 12 tables with seatings for 48 people. Then in 1971, Union Pacific 4801 was sold to the Boise Cascade Society in Boise, Idaho. Boise Cascade Society held onto the car until 1979 when it was sold to the Rio Grande as a spare for the Silver Banquet. The original dining car on the Rio Grande Zephyr. This car operated for 4 more years until 1983 when it was sold to the Xanterra Corporation. Also, this car was also stored in the rail yard and vandalized a bit. And then in 2011, this car was then acquired by the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado. And then, like in 2014, it was repainted into a Union Pacific paint scheme as Union Pacific 4801 and parked next to the train depot where Denver and Rio Grande 683 once sat. Also, today, Union Pacific 4801 is preserved at the Colorado Railroad Museum where it is on display today. What you see right behind me is Colorado and Southern 254. Colorado and Southern 254 was built by the Standard Steel Car Company in 1922 and is a railway post office coach. Colorado and Southern 254 was used for hauling mail in the past and even delivered mail many years ago. This car included a section for baggage and express, as well as a compartment for use of the postal service. Also, this coach was used on the Colorado and Southern Railroad on passenger trains many years ago, then later retired and then came to be on static display at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado in 1968, where it is today. And as you see this car, you can even go inside it and check out the interior and see there are two mannequins inside that looks like they are sorting mail like a real person did in the past as well. What you see right behind me is Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 96. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 96 was built by the Barney and Smith shops in Dayton, Ohio in 1886 and is a heavyweight observation coach. The coach was originally built for the Chicago, Burlington, and Northern Railroad as Chicago, Burlington, and Northern B99. The car was renumbered as Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 90 in 1902. Then in 1906, the car was completely rebuilt by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy and renumbered as 96. This coach was used on the back of passenger trains a lot while it was in service. Then in 1962, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 96 was later retired and was sold to the Intermountain chapter of National Railway Historical Society in Denver, Colorado. With the introduction of Amtrak, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 96 no longer met the mechanical standards of modern rail cars, and in 1972 was placed permanently on display at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. The coach is sometimes used for reenactments of presidents giving speeches on the back of trains as well. What you see right behind me is Coors C988. Coors C988 was originally built as Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific 514 in 1938 and rebuilt as an EMDS W900 in 1957 as Coors C988 and is the 234 36th diesel built and was put in an order of in Order 7543. This locomotive was once used on the Chicago, Rock Island, and Pacific Railroad as a switcher originally, and then was then sold to the Coors Company of Golden, Colorado, and used for moving freight cars around in the facility along with other diesels. Also, then in 2004, Coors C988 was then retired and then donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. And there were times people could visit the cab, and I don't know if that still happens or not, but can still be found on display at the museum where it is today. What you see right behind me is Coors 5400. Coors 5400 was built in the Alexandra shops of Virginia of Western Fruit Growers Express in 1929 and is a refrigerator car. Coors 5400 has also been known as Western Fruit Growers Express 67685, and this car was used at Coors of Golden, Colorado in 1933. Coors leased 20 cars from the Burlington Refrigerator Express Company, a subsidiary of the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad, and the next year took delivery of 10 more. Numbers were Adolph Coors Express, numbered from 5400 to 5429. They were used to ship Coors products to distributors in Colorado and adjacent states. Also, in 1971, the car was donated by the Burlington Northern Railroad, then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum and was painted in the Coors scheme. And Coors 5400 can be found on display at the museum where it is today.
You ready to get off? I'll go.
Denver Rio Grande 4990. Denver and Rio Grande 04990 was built by the Denver and Rio Grande shops in the 1900s and is a narrow gauge caboose. Denver and Rio Grande 04990 was originally built as a boxcar and as Denver and Rio Grande 4343 and then converted to being a caboose. Denver and Rio Grande 04990 was used on trains in the past for the Denver and Rio Grande as a boxcar and then became a caboose during its life. Then, years later, Denver and Rio Grande 04990 was then retired and then put on display in Central Park in Boulder, Colorado with Colorado Northwestern 30 in 1975. And then in 2010, Denver and Rio Grande 04990 was moved to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado with Colorado Northwestern 30 and can be found at the museum today. Denver and Rio Grande 49 was built by the Denver and Rio Grande shops in 1881 and is a four-wheel bobber caboose. Denver and Rio Grande 49 is one of 88 cabooses built by the shop. It was built in 1887. Denver and Rio Grande 49 was renumbered as Denver and Rio Grande 0548 and has been added with 2 more sets of drive wheels and had 8 wheels. Also, this caboose was used for freight trains on the narrow gauge Denver and Rio Grande lines in the past. Years later, this caboose was then restored to its 1880s look. Then, in 1938, this caboose was sold to the Durango Animas River placer mine for use as bunkhouse. Then in 1984, Denver and Rio Grande 49 was purchased by the Colorado Railroad Museum and is like the oldest caboose in the museum's collection today. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 49 is even preserved at the Colorado Railroad Museum today and is like one of two four-wheel cabooses in the collection as well. What you see right behind me is Standard Oil 1. Standard Oil Company 1 was built by Cook Locomotive and Machine Works in Paterson, New Jersey in 1920 and is the 62,754th steam locomotive built by that factory and is an 040T tank engine four-wheeler type steam locomotive. This locomotive was originally built for the Standard Oil Company in Casper, Wyoming as Standard Oil Company 1 and also was used as a switcher in the facility. Then in 1960, the locomotive was later transferred to the American Oil Company in Casper, Wyoming and worked in the facility as Standard Oil American Oil Company 1 as a switch engine there. Then the locomotive was retired in 1962 and then donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. Also, Standard Oil Company 1 was even used on a parade float, which was on a semi-trailer at the Golden, Colorado Parade in 2014. And even though the locomotive is on display at the museum and you can even visit the locomotive's cab and even be in the spot where the engineer and firemen once were and even ring the locomotive's bell. And that's how it's done. What you see right behind me is Colorado and Southern 10606. Colorado and Southern 10606 was built by the Colorado and Southern in 1944 and is a wooden caboose. Colorado and Southern 10606 is among the last wooden cabooses built. Also, Colorado and Southern 10606 has a Burlington route sign on the side as well. Colorado and Southern 10606 served on freight trains from Denver, Colorado, then south to Trinidad, Colorado, and north into Wyoming. Then in 1968, Colorado and Southern 10606 was retired and then came to be on display at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it can be seen on display today. Colorado and Southern 99201 was built by the Cook Locomotive and Machine Works in Paterson, New Jersey in 1900 and is a rotary snowblower. Colorado and Southern 99201 was originally built as Colorado and Southern 3 and later was renumbered as Colorado and Southern 0270, and in 1935 this rotary snowblower was used on 36-inch gauge tracks, then later regauged to being on standard gauge tracks in 1943, and then was rebuilt in 1949, then renumbered as Colorado and Southern 99201 and was used on the Colorado and Southern line for blowing snow off the tracks a lot when there was a lot of snow on the line. And also after Colorado and Southern 99201 was retired, then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it can be found on display today. And originally it sat in the parking lot till it then got moved onto the museum grounds. What you see right behind me is Union Pacific 4455. Union Pacific 4455 was built by Lima in Lima, Ohio in 1920 and is the 5992nd steam locomotive built by that factory and is an 0606 wheeler type steam locomotive and is an S6 class steam locomotive. Union Pacific 4455 was once used as a switch engine in the yards of the Union Pacific Railroad and was built to burn coal. Union Pacific 4455 was used in the Cheyenne, Wyoming yard of the Union Pacific Railroad. Then in 1949 the locomotive was sold to Laramie Valley Railway Company and road name is Laramie Valley Railway Company 4455 at Laramie, Wyoming. This locomotive is still Union Pacific 4455 as well. Then in 1970, Monolith Portland retired Union Pacific 4455 and donated it to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it can be seen on display today. Also, Union Pacific 4455 is one of 6 remaining Union Pacific 060s left in the world today and can be found on display at the Colorado Railroad Museum here in Golden as well. Denver and Salt Lake 10,060 was built by the Denver and Salt Lake Railway and manufactured with recycled materials in its Denver shops in Denver, Colorado in 1936 and is a steel caboose. Denver and Salt Lake 10,060 was created using the remains of a former wooden caboose as well as whatever the shop could cobble together. That said, it was built like a tank. While doing the work, it was discovered that at least part of the caboose utilizes half-inch steel. Later, the caboose was renumbered and given the road name as Denver and Rio Grande 01391 in 1947 and was used on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. This caboose was used on the Denver and Salt Lake and Railroad and Denver and Rio Grande Railroad on freight trains in the past. Also, this caboose was once in a wreck and later was restored. Then in the 1980s, Denver and Salt Lake 10,060 was retired and then years later came to be part of the Forney Museum of Transportation when it was on 15th and Platt Street, and there was no room for it in the collection when the museum was relocated, so it was going to be by the trolley station, the Platte Valley Trolley, but then was donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Navajo coach. The Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Navajo coach was built by the Budd Company in the 1930s and is an observation coach with a curved back wall The Navajo coach was used on the back of the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe's Super Chief train. Also, the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Navajo coach was built as a stainless steel, streamlined observation and sleeping car. Ran between Chicago and Los Angeles on the Super Chief and is the first diesel-powered all-Pullman passenger train in the country. The Super Chief was a significant portion of the 39-hour journey was through the American Southwest. Then years later, the Navajo coach was then later on retired and came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum here in Golden, Colorado, where it is on display today. Denver and Rio Grande 1230 was built by the Pullman Car Company in 1950 and is a combination baggage coach. Denver and Rio Grande 1230 was also used on passenger trains in the past on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, and passengers would ride in the coach of the car and baggage would be carried in the baggage compartment of the coach. Then Denver and Rio Grande rebuilt the car into a baggage dormitory coach, although the dorm area has now been removed. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 1230 was also used on the Denver and Rio Grande ski train in the past, as well as, and then the coach was retired and then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it can be found on display today. And also Denver and Rio Grande 1230 sat in the rail yard of the museum near the turntable. Then in 2015, the car was also moved to the top of the hill to be put behind Denver and Rio Grande 5771 and B Unit Denver and Rio Grande 5762. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 1230 appears to have the number 1231 on the other side and 1230 on one side as well. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 5762. Denver and Rio Grande 5762 was built by Electromotor Division in 1955 and is the 20,531st diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an F9B type diesel locomotive. Denver and Rio Grande 5762 is a B unit that was used behind the Denver and Rio Grande 5771 a lot. Denver and Rio Grande 5762 was originally Denver and Rio Grande 5753, then later renumbered 5762, and since it's a B unit, it is cabless. Denver and Rio Grande 5762 was used on the Denver and Rio Grande Zephyr and ski train in the past, and later this B unit was retired and then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum, where it is on display today and can be seen behind Denver and Rio Grande 5771 today at the museum. Denver and Rio Grande 5771 was built by Electromotor Division in 1955 and is the 20,527 diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an F9A type diesel locomotive. Denver and Rio Grande 5771 was built as a streamlined diesel locomotive for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and was used to haul trains like the Ski Train and the Rio Grande Zephyr in these states, Colorado and Utah. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 5771 went on the mountains and also once went on through the Moffat Tunnel. Denver and Rio Grande 5771 hauled the Ski Train in 1983. Then in the mid-1900s, Denver and Rio Grande 5771 was donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and awaited on the property of Coors Brewing Company after being retired. Then Denver and Rio Grande 5771 came to the final resting spot, which is at the museum and can be found on display where it is today, and sometimes the cab is open for display where you can sit where the engineer and roadman once sat, and even the bell is still there and you can even ring the locomotive's bell. And that's how it's done. What you see right behind me is Union Pacific 9149. Union Pacific 9149 was built by the Union Pacific Railroad in 1939 and is a boxcar. Union Pacific 9149 was used on freight trains to transport express and package freight on overnight passenger trains between Denver, Colorado to Omaha, Nebraska, Salt Lake City, Utah to Los Angeles, California, and Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. Also, Union Pacific 9149 has the word Challenger written on it because it was used on a passenger train called Challenger. Then later, Union Pacific 9149 was retired and then came to be on static display at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Colorado and Southern 1690. Colorado and Southern 1690 was built in like the 1920s or 1910s or 1930s or 1940s or later on, and is a 40-foot steel boxcar. Colorado and Southern 1690 was also used for freight trains in the past on some various railroads such as Colorado and Southern, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, and hauled cargo such as boxes, crates, and all other different types of cargo in the past. Then later on, Colorado and Southern 1690 was retired and was donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad in 1957 and can be seen here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is San Luis Central 247. San Luis Central 247 was built by General American Car Company in 1957 and is a refrigerator car. San Luis Central 247 was originally used for Railway Express Agency as Railway Express Agency 7451 and carried food inside to be refrigerated inside, like produce, potatoes, and etc. Then in 1972, the car was sold to the San Luis Central Railroad at San Luis Central 247 and still carried all different kinds of produce across the nation. when it was used on freight trains in the past. Then later, San Luis Central 247 was retired and then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today. What you see right behind me is San Luis Central 219. San Luis Central 219 was built by General American Car Company in 1957 and is a refrigerator car. San Luis Central 219 was originally used for Railway Express Agency as Railway Express Agency 7645 and carried food inside to be refrigerated inside, like produce, potatoes, and etc. Then in 1972 the car was sold to the San Luis Central Railroad as San Luis Central 219 and still carried all different kinds of produce across the nation when it was used on freight trains in the past. Then later, San Luis Central 219 was retired and then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today, preserved today. What you see right behind me is Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 77175. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 77175 was built by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad in 1967 and is a 50-foot refrigerator car for the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 77175 was also used for the Burlington Northern era and also carried food inside, like vegetables, fruit, and anything that would be refrigerated. And as Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 77175 was used on freight trains, one time it got tagged with graffiti, and then the graffiti all got removed. And then later the car was retired and then put on static display at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Union Pacific 906-958. Union Pacific 906-958 was built in 1963 and is currently a maintenance of way office car. Union Pacific 906-958 was originally built as a refrigerator car as Pacific Fruit Growers Express 906-958 and carried produce and other food that it carried when it was used on freight trains in the past. Then in the late 1970s or early 1980s, it was converted to being a maintenance of way car. Union Pacific 906-958 was used as the maintenance of way workers office in the past and retired and then put for sale on Ozark Mountain Rail Car and then sold to the Colorado Railroad Museum sometime between late 2013 and 2015 and is preserved at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 5717. Denver and Rio Grande 5717 was built by American Car and Foundry Company in St. Charles, Missouri in 1904 and is a stock car. Denver and Rio Grande 5717 once hauled cattle from farms to whatever destination in the past on the Denver and Rio Grande. And Denver and Rio Grande 5717 also later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today as well. You see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 318. Denver and Rio Grande 318 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1896 and is the 147 69th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 280 consolidation type steam locomotive and is a C18 class steam locomotive. Denver and Rio Grande 318 was originally built as Florence and Cripple Creek Railroad 8 and named Goldfield in Cripple Creek, Colorado. Then in 1915, Cripple Creek in Colorado Springs 8 Railroad 8. Then in 1917 sold to the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and renumbered as 428. Then in 1921 it was sold to the Denver and Rio Grande as Denver and Rio Grande. .428 once again. Then in 1924 the locomotive was renumbered as Denver and Rio Grande 318, in which it is presently, and later it was retired, and in 1953 the locomotive was sold to the Morse Brother Machinery and Supply Company. Then in 1954 was sold to the Narrow Gauge Motel Incorporated in Alamosa, Colorado. Then in 1958, the locomotive had a liquidation to Robert Richardson, the co-founder of the Colorado Railroad Museum. Then later that year, Denver and Rio Grande 318 came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum, where it is today, and it can be found on display on the museum grounds where it is today. And also, Denver and Rio Grande 318 is one of 10 surviving Denver and Rio Grande 280s left in the world today, and is also one of 9 surviving narrow gauge Denver and Rio Grande 280s left today as well, and can be found here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. You see right behind me is Rio Grande Southern 7. Rio Grande Southern 7 was built in 1930 by the Rio Grande Southern Railroad shops in Ridgway, Colorado, and is a galloping goose, and is the last galloping goose built of all 7 built. Rio Grande Southern 7 was outshopped in October 1936 using a Pierce Arrow 1926 body and a Ford 1936 V8 engine. The first vehicle of this type was built by Rio Grande Southern in 1913 as a track maintenance crew vehicle. Although it was wrecked in 1925, it inspired the idea of using them for scheduled service. The railroad developed the first of the geese to keep its contract to run mail to towns in the Rocky Mountains in Colorado. At that time, there were not enough passengers to carry, not enough passengers or cargo to justify the more expensive steam train service. Also, Rio Grande Southern 7 later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. Also, Rio Grande Southern 7 was taken to the Cumbres and Toltec Scenic Railroad in Chama, New Mexico in 2016 for the narrow gauge reunion, and can still be seen operating here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. Also, Rio Grande Southern 7 is one of 6 remaining original galloping geese that survive today, and this one can be found here at the Colorado Railroad Museum, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 280. Denver and Rio Grande 280 was built by Jackson and Sharp Car Company in Wilmington, Delaware in 1881 and is a 44-seat passenger car. Originally, it was numbered 56 and named Rico. Till about 1886, it was given its current number, and the name Rico was soon dropped. Denver and Rio Grande 280 is one of 60 narrow-gauge coaches that would become the quintessential style of car used on the Colorado 3-foot gauge line well into the 1950s. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 280 was used on passenger trains on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad a lot in the past. Then, later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and can sometimes be seen on train sets and passengers riding on the train around the museum whenever the train is running as well. What you see right behind me is Golden City and San Juan 3. Golden City and San Juan 3 was built by the Plymouth Locomotive Works in Plymouth, Ohio, and is a narrow-gauge 25-ton Plymouth diesel. Golden City and San Juan 3 is a gasoline-powered engine, apparently worked for the U.S. Gypsum. Also, the diesel was used to shunt a lot on narrow-gauge lines on the Golden City and San Juan Railroad. Then in 1965, Golden City and San Juan 3 was bought by the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and came to be part of the museum and is used for shunting equipment around in the yard, or just even moves around in the yard as well. What you see right behind me is the Rio Grande Southern Rico. The Rio Grande Southern Rico coach was built by Bill Meyer and Small Company in 1882 as Denver and Rio Grande Postal Car 4. Then in 1882, the coach was rebuilt into an excursion car as Rio Grande, later in 1882, as Rio Grande Southern 569. Its first number on the railroad was Rio Grande Southern C3 when it was classified as a construction diner. In 1892, after the railroad was completed, it was rebuilt as a business car and named Rico. About 1909, the coach was renamed Montezuma. Then in 1917, it was renumbered as B21 when the coach was transferred to work in service in 1933, and it was numbered as O21. Also, this coach was a private business car for a guy who photographed the Rio Grande Southern, a guy named William Henry Jackson. Also, this car then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today and sometimes is seen stationary or can be seen rolling around having people ride aboard whenever trains are running. You see right behind me is the Roundhouse. The Cornelius W. Howe Roundhouse was completed in 2000 and is named after one of the museum's founders, Cornelius W. Howe. Also, the doors came from the Denver and Rio Grande Roundhouse in Alamosa, Colorado. The Cornelius W. Howe Roundhouse is used for restoration and even for the steam engines to be parked inside sometimes. The Cornelius W. Howe Roundhouse has 5 stalls. The roundhouse houses the tools and equipment needed to restore and repair rolling stock and locomotives. The museum roundhouse workers work about 1,200 hours a month restoring and maintaining the equipment at the museum. What you see right behind me is the turntable.
This turntable was built by the American Bridge Company of Chicago, Illinois at its LeSig Works in 1900 and is an Armstrong turntable. This turntable is 74 feet and is pushed around by human beings like myself. This turntable is used for turning the museum's equipment around to put them from one track to another. This turntable came from the end of a Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad branch line at St. Francis, Kansas, and then came to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado to be part of the museum structures and used by the roundhouse and to turn trains around or to another track.
What you see right behind me is Western Weighing and Inspection Bureau 910.
Western Weighing and Inspection Bureau 910 was built to test weight and is a weight test car. This car was owned by the Western Weighing and Inspection Bureau. Western Weighing and Inspection Bureau 910 was used for checking accuracy of track scales used to weigh loaded freight cars in Colorado and Wyoming, and was based in Denver, Colorado for many years. Then Western Weighing and Inspection Bureau 910 was retired and then donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado by the Western Weighing and Inspection Bureau in 1990. Also, today Western Weighing and Inspection Bureau 910 can be seen on display here at the museum today.
What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 0524.
Denver and Rio Grande 0524 was built by the Denver and Rio Grande shops in 1880 and is an 8-wheel bobber caboose. Denver and Rio Grande 0524 was used on trains in the past on the Denver and Rio Grande narrow gauge line and was the office for the train crew. Denver and Rio Grande 0524 originally had 4 wheels and rebuilt in 1918 with trucks. Then in 1953, Denver and Rio Grande 0524 was then retired and then dismantled and then eventually reached the Colorado Railroad Museum, which it did and where is preserved today as well.
What you see right behind me is Rio Grande Southern 2.
Rio Grande Southern 2 was built in 1931 from a Buick Master 6 four-door sedan with a 28 HP engine and is a galloping goose. Rio Grande Southern 2 had a larger frame than Rio Grande Southern 1 and a 16-inch mail express compartment, although it still rode on 2 trucks weighing 10,300 pounds and 2 inches 11 feet long, 29 inches 11 feet long. The front sat 4 passengers and more could ride in the rear of the, or even apparently on top. In 1939, Rio Grande Southern 2 was rebuilt with a Pierce Arrow body and new engine using parts from a goose that operated on the San Cristobal Tobol Railroad from 1935. Rio Grande Southern 2 was built to pull mail. The Rio Grande Southern lost its mail contract in favor of highway mail carriers, and numbers 3, 4, 5, and 7 were converted for tourist operations. Large windows were cut in the sides of the freight compartments, and seatings was added. In summer of 1950, 1,000 people rode the geese, and in 1951, 2,000, but there were 2,000, but that was their last year of passenger service. The Rio Grande Southern had petitioned to discontinue service on the line, and the last work of the geese on their home territory was to help take up the rails. Also, Rio Grande Southern 2 then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum, where it can sometimes be seen running on the museum grounds. Also, Rio Grande Southern 2 is one of 6 remaining original galloping geese that survive today and can be found here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Colorado Midland 111.
Colorado Midland 111 was built by the Pullman Company in 1887 and is an observation car. Colorado Midland 111 was built as a first-class passenger coach. Then in 1905, this car was built as an observation parlor car. Also, Colorado Midland 111 has also been given 2 road names, with one side of the car saying Colorado Midland 111 and the other Midland Terminal 29. This coach was then in 1909 reclassified as an observation chair car, and the seats were replaced with reclining chair seats. Then in 1949, the car was sold to Arthur B. Hall of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Then Arthur B. Hall sold this car to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, 1960, where it is on display today.
What you see right behind me is Colorado and Southern 1009.
Colorado and Southern 1009 was built by the Union Pacific Shops in 1883 and is a four-wheeler bobber caboose. Colorado and Southern 1009 was originally numbered as Denver and South Park and Pacific 78. Then later was Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison 1516 from 1889 to 1898, then renumbered as Colorado and Southern 312 from 1898 to 1912, then renumbered to Colorado and Southern 1009, which it presently is, and also this caboose was used for on the railroads it was used for in the past, especially with the freight trains. Then Colorado and Southern 1009 came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today, and it is one of 2 four-wheel cabooses in the museum's collection as well.
What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 159.
Denver and Rio Grande 159 was built by the Denver and Rio Grande shops in 1924 and is a wooden refrigerator car, once used for hauling food on board in the past, such as produce, vegetables, and other food a refrigerator car would carry. And this car was used on the narrow gauge lines, like I think mostly the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad.
and then years later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 167. Denver and Rio Grande 167 was built by the Denver and Rio Grande shops in 1926 and is a wooden refrigerator car once used for hauling food on board in the past, such as produce, vegetables, and other food a refrigerator car would carry. And this car was used on the narrow gauge lines, I think mostly the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, and then years later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 284. Denver and Rio Grande 284 was built by Jackson and Sharp Car Company in Wilmington, Delaware in 1881 and is a 44-seat passenger car. Denver and Rio Grande 284 is one of 60 narrow gauge coaches that would become quintessential open platform style of cars used on the Colorado 3-foot gauge line as well into the 1950s. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 284 was used on passenger trains on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad a lot in the past, and then later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and can sometimes be seen on train sets and passengers riding the train around the museum whenever the train is running as well. What you see right behind me is Great Western 100. Great Western 100 was built by Wagner in 1887 and is a combination baggage and passenger coach. Great Western 100 was the only coach owned by the Great Western Railway in Colorado. Great Western 100 also traveled on the Loveland to Eaton to Longmont, Colorado lines when being used on a passenger train in the past. Then Great Western 100 was then retired and then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today. What you see right behind me is Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 5629. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 5629 was built by CB&Q's West Burlington shops in West Burlington, Iowa in 1940 and is a 484 Northern type steam locomotive and is an 05B class steam locomotive. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 5629 was built for passenger service and fast freight. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 5629 began its career on the Chicago to Denver main line. The locomotive was transferred to the Twin Cities in the mid-1940s and made its way back west in 1950, hauling freight between Lincoln, Nebraska and Denver, Colorado. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 5629 was originally built to burn coal, then later converted to burn oil. Then Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 5629 was stored in Lincoln, Nebraska and served as a stationary boiler, providing heat to Lincoln Station during a renovation in the winter of 1961.
Then in 1963, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 5629 was then donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and put on static display, is known to be the largest artifact in the museum. Also, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 5629 is one of 4 remaining Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 484s left in the world today, and can be found here in Golden, Colorado at the Colorado Railroad Museum, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 205065.
Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 205065 was built in 1929 as a flat car and originally numbered as Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 91143 and was added with a wedge snowplow years later and renumbered as Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 205065. Also, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 205065 was converted to being a snowplow, but still is a flat car and used for plowing snow off the tracks on lines on the plains of Colorado, Nebraska, Kansas. This type of plow is best used at high speeds through light snow. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 205065 was loaded with broken stone to give extra weight and stability, coupled to the front of a locomotive, and it would then be given a run start to ram into a snowdrift as far as it could go. Also, later, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 205065 was then retired and then came to be on static display at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison 191.
Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison 191 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1880 and is the 49/19 steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 280 consolidation type steam locomotive and is a B4A class steam locomotive. Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison 191 was originally numbered as and built for as Denver, South Park, and Pacific Railway 51 on the railroad. Then in 1885 was renumbered as 191. Then the locomotive was transferred to the Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison Railroad in 1889 as Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison 191. 10 years later, when the Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison was consolidated into the Colorado and Southern, it was renumbered as Colorado and Southern 31. Then later, it was sold to Edward Hines Lumber Company as Edward Hines Lumber Company 102 in Park Falls, Wisconsin in 1902, and the locomotive was sold to A.A. Bigelow and Company in Washburn, Wisconsin, where it was renumbered and given the road name as A.A. Bigelow and Company 7. Then in 1906 it was sold to Robbins Railroad Company as Robbins Railroad Company 7 in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. Then in 1919 it was transferred to the Thunder Lake Lumber Company and renumbered and given the road name as Thunder Lake Lumber Company and 7. Then in 1932 was retired and donated to the city of Rhinelander, Wisconsin. In 1973, the locomotive was transferred to the Colorado Railroad Historical Foundation for cosmetic restoration and displayed at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, as it appeared when it worked for the Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison as Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison 191. Today, Denver, Leadville, and Gunnison 191 can be found at the Colorado Railroad Museum, and the locomotive is the oldest steam locomotive in the state of Colorado and can be found here in Golden, Colorado at the museum as well.
What you see right behind me is Florence and Cripple Creek 588.
Florence and Cripple Creek 588 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1898 and is a narrow gauge boxcar. Florence and Cripple Creek 588 was used on the Florence and Cripple Creek Railroad in the past and on narrow gauge freight trains a lot in the past. And then later, Florence and Cripple Creek 588 later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today as well.
What you see right behind me is Colorado and Northwestern 1026.
Colorado and Northwestern 1026 was built by Barney and Smith Car Company in 1897 and is a narrow gauge boxcar. Colorado and Northwestern 1026 was used on freight trains in the past and even used on the Colorado Northwestern line, as well as hauling materials that it once hauled in the past. Colorado and Northwestern 1026 is one of many Colorado Northwestern boxcars that were built in the past as well. Then later on, Colorado Northwestern 1026 came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 878.
Denver and Rio Grande 878 was built by the American Car and Foundry and Company in St. Charles, Missouri in 1904 and is a wooden gondola. Denver and Rio Grande 878 was used to carry like rocks, stones, gravel, and whatever this gondola hauled in the past on freight trains for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. Denver and Rio Grande 878 was then later donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum by Mallory Hope Farrell in 1971 and can be seen and preserved at the museum today.
What you see right behind me is Denver and Intermountain 902.
Denver and Intermountain 902 was built by the Denver Tramway in 1924 and is a caboose built with a side door. Denver and Intermountain 902 was used on the Denver and Intermountain Railroad on freight trains in the past and used on the Denver and Intermountain Railroad on freight trains in the past and used on the Denver and Intermountain Electric Railway from Denver, Colorado to Lakewood, Colorado to Golden, Colorado until 1953. Then Denver and Intermountain 902 was retired and then later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it can be found on display today. What you see right behind me is Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 13862. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 13862 was built by the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Aurora shops in Aurora, Illinois in 1917 and is a wooden way car caboose. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 13862 was used behind freight trains on the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad during the career of this caboose. Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 13862 was used as the railroad workers' office when being used behind freight trains on the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy Railroad. Also, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 13862 is one of many wooden Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy cabooses built in the past. Also, Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy 13862 was retired and then came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and it is seen on display at the museum and is also even used for birthday parties inside as well.
What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 5714.
Denver and Rio Grande 5714 was built by American Car and Foundry Company in St. Charles, Missouri in 1904 and is a stock car. Denver and Rio Grande 5714 once hauled cattle from farms to whatever destination in the past on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad for many years. Then later on the car was retired and then later came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is seen on display today.
What you see right behind me is Westside Lumber Company 12.
Westside Lumber Company 12 was built by the Lima Locomotive Works in Lima, Ohio in 1926 and is the 3,302nd steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 3-truck Shay type steam locomotive. Originally, it was used by the Swain Lumber Company in Oroville, California, and was originally numbered as Swain Lumber Company 6. In 1940, it was then sold to the Westside Lumber Company in Tuolumne, California, where it was renumbered as Westside Lumber Company 12 and operated on the Westside Lumber Company. Then, in 1958, it was used by Pickering Lumber Corp., but it was still lettered as Westside Lumber Company 12. Also, the locomotive was used as a logging locomotive for many years. Then it was sold to Francis Cotty, which it was then used by Westside and Cherry Valley Railroad, but retaining its number. In 1986, it was sold to the Georgetown Loop Railroad, and it ran on the Georgetown Loop Railroad in Silver Plume, Colorado. It was used to pull the trains on the Georgetown Loop until 2004 when the railroad ceased operations and it was moved to the Colorado Railroad Museum where it operated on the museum grounds until about 2009 and is currently parked in storage at the museum but not actually owned by the museum though. Also, Westside Lumber Company 12 is one of 7 remaining Westside Lumber Company shays surviving today and they're all 3-truck shays and is currently stored at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, along with number 14, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Manitou and Pikes Peak 12.
Manitou and Pikes Peak 12 was built by the Manitou and Pikes Peak shops in 1955 and is a shovel-nose diesel-electric power car. Originally was powered by 2 General Motors 110 diesels. Was built to the same body style as the General Electric built units. In 1982, it was rebuilt and renumbered as Manitou and Pikes Peak 23. Then later on, it was retired and was in storage at the Manitou and Pikes Peak Railroad for a while. Then later it was renumbered to its original number. Then, in 2019, it was donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum by the Manitou and Pikes Peak Railroad, where it can be seen on display today.
What you see right behind me is Manitou and Pikes Peak 9.
Manitou and Pikes Peak 9 was built by General Electric in Schenectady, New York in 1946 and is the 283 72nd diesel locomotive built by that factory and is a shovel-nose cog-type diesel locomotive. This engine was powered by 2 Cummins NHS diesels as built. Later rebuilt to have twin Cummins 885 diesels. Also, this locomotive was once used by the Manitou and Pikes Peak Railroad for a number of years, which runs between Manitou Springs and the top of Pikes Peak. Then, later on, it was retired and was in storage at the Manitou and Pikes Peak Railroad for a while. Then, in 2019, it was donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum by the Manitou and Pikes Peak Railroad, where it can be seen on display today.
What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 491.
Denver and Rio Grande 491 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1902 and is the 205 50th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 282 Mikado type steam locomotive and is a K37 class steam locomotive. This locomotive was originally numbered 1105 and the locomotive was made as a standard gauge locomotive and was a 280 consolidation and was built as a class 190 locomotive. Then in about 1924 the class was changed to C41. Then it was rebuilt to narrow gauge 282 Mikado in Denver and Rio Grande Zone Burnham shops between 1928 to 1930, and this one was rebuilt in 1928, and this one then got renumbered as Denver and Rio Grande 491, and class was changed to K37. For many years, this engine worked the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, hauling trains for many years on the standard gauge Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, and then the narrow gauge Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. Then later on it was retired and was donated to the Colorado State Historical Society in Alamosa, Colorado by the Denver and Rio Grande in 1972 and was moved to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado in 1985 and was on static display, and people would also climb into the locomotive's cab as it was retired, and then the locomotive was going under restoration to operation and the locomotive started operating again in 2014, and oftentimes Denver and Rio Grande 491 can be seen operating at the Colorado Railroad Museum, pulling the museum train on days the train runs, and 491 also did the first doubleheader run with Denver and Rio Grande 280 346, which is also here at the museum and is even used for a day out with Thomas the Tank Engine and is coupled behind Thomas for the event for train operations and is even used for the Polar Express event. Also, Denver and Rio Grande 491 is one of 22 surviving Denver and Rio Grande 282s left in the world today and is one of 8 K37s left in existence today, and 491 can be found here often operating at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today.
What you see right behind me is Golden City and San Juan 4.
Golden City and San Juan 4 was built by General Electric in Schenectady, New York in 1964 and is the 350 149th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is a GE 55-ton center cab type diesel locomotive. It was originally used for the Algoma Steel Company, but original number is unknown. Then later it was used for the East Broadtop Railroad in Mount Union, Pennsylvania. Then went to the Durango and Silverton narrow gauge Railroad and used by that railroad. Then in 2006, it came to be part of the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and was repainted as Golden City in San Juan 4, but just painted black mostly. Then in 2019, it was repainted with a Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy's black and silver livery, and today it can either be seen running on the narrow gauge tracks on the museum or just sitting in the yard by the turntable sometimes.
What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 5401.
Denver and Rio Grande 5401 was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1980 and is the 786 264-4th diesel locomotive built by that factory and is an SD40T-2 type diesel locomotive. This locomotive was used for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and used for hauling freight trains on the railroad. Then in 2005 was used for the Union Pacific Railroad and renumbered as Union Pacific 8594, but it still had its Denver and Rio Grande livery and had some yellow rectangles with the numbers as it would be used for Union Pacific, and also on the nose seen with the Union Pacific logo as well. Also in 2008, it was then renumbered as Union Pacific 9871 and still been used on the Union Pacific. Also, it even got spray painted with graffiti, and then sometime in the middle of the year, it was put in storage. Then in 2010, it was retired and sat on the property of Coors Brewing Company, and it was awaiting to be moved to the museum. Then in 2018, it was finally moved to the Colorado Railroad Museum and moved by Burlington Northern Santa Fe Diesels to 44th Avenue, and it had to be carried by some pipe layer machines, then to get it across the bridge, a set of temporary tracks, and then put it on the tracks at the museum, then got repainted to its original look with its Denver and Rio Grande look and number it had, and seen preserved here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today, and also you can even ring the locomotive's bell.
Hi, I'm Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy Segment Show. Also today in this segment, I'm at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and continuing episode 158 with part 3. What you see right behind me is Manitou and Pikes Peak 1.
Manitou and Pikes Peak 1 was built by Baldwin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in 1890 and is the 108/35th steam locomotive built by that factory and is an 042 cog type steam locomotive. This is the original Manitou and Pikes Peak steam locomotive built and is the oldest one built and the oldest surviving one. It was originally named John Hurlburt and was built to go up steeper grades like other cog trains built were. This one was used on the cog railway between Manitou Springs, Colorado and the top of the summit of Pikes Peak. The locomotive didn't have the number 1 till 1893. Then later, it was retired and was donated to the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Then, in 1979, it was donated to the Colorado Railroad Historical Foundation and was then moved to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. It also sat adjacent to the parking lot till 2022 when it was moved to the present spot on the museum grounds, as if it looks like as if it's climbing a steep grade as it was meant to do all those years ago. And the hill it's standing on is like its natural habitat as well, as if it looks like it's climbing a steeper grade. Also, Manitou and Pikes Peak 1 is one of 4 surviving cog steam locomotives from the Manitou and Pikes Peak Cog Railway, and this one can even be found here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today. What you see right behind me is Westside Lumber Company 14. Westside Lumber Company 14 was built by the Lima Locomotive Works in Lima, Ohio in 1916 and is the 2835th steam locomotive built by that factory and is a 3-truck shade type steam locomotive. It was originally used by the Sierra Nevada Wood and Lumber Company in Hobart Mills, California, and was originally numbered 10. When the Sierra Nevada Wood and Lumber Company went bankrupt, it was then sold to a scrap dealer, Hyman Michaels, in Chicago, Illinois in 1937, but it didn't get scrapped. In 1940, it was then sold to the Westside Lumber Company in Tuolumne, California, and it was renumbered 14 and operated on the Westside Lumber Company. Then, in 1958, it was used by the Pickering Lumber Corp., but it was still lettered Westside Lumber Company and kept the number. Also, the locomotive was used as a logging locomotive for many years. Then, in 1965, it was then sold to Hall-Willmunder, which would be used by the Camino Cable and Northern Railroad in Camino, California, and it was renumbered 4. Then, in 1974, it was sold to the Colorado Central Narrow Gauge Railroad in Central City, Colorado, and had its number back to 14. It operated there till 1981 when it was then moved to the Georgetown Loop Railroad in Silver Plume, Colorado. It ran at the Georgetown Loop Railroad until 2004 when the Ashby's operating contract ceased on the railroad, and the locomotive was then moved to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it operated on the museum grounds till about 2009 and is currently parked in storage at the museum, but not actually owned by the museum though. In late 2021, it was then being repainted all round. In February the following year, the project was completed, and the name Rosa was pasted on the side of the cab, which it is named after Rosa Ashby as well. Also, Westside Lumber Company 14 is one of 7 remaining Westside Lumber Company shays surviving today, and they're all 3-truck shays, and 14 is currently stored at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, along with number 12 where they are today. What you see right behind me is Manitou and Pikes Peak 7. Manitou and Pikes Peak 7 was built by the Colorado Midland Shops in Colorado Springs, Colorado in 1938 and is a gas diesel rail car. This car is believed to be the very first internal combustion powered cog railway vehicle on Earth as well. This car was built for the purpose of having a smaller piece of equipment to run that was cheaper to operate when the off-season occurred. Originally, General Motors powered with 707 gasoline engines. It was repowered by Cadillac V8 in the early 1950s and finally with a Cummins diesel in the 1990s. Also, this locomotive was once used by the Manitou and Pikes Peak Railroad for a number of years, which runs between Manitou Springs and the top of Pikes Peak. Then later on, it was retired and was put in storage at the Manitou and Pikes Peak Railroad for a while. Then in 2019, it was donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado by the Manitou and Pikes Peak Cog Railway, where it can be seen on display today. In 2022, it was relocated to this spot near the wooden fence, as if it looks like it's climbing a steep grade, as to tell you how it was meant to climb grades very steep that conventional trains wouldn't be able to climb as well.
What you see right behind me is Union Tank Line 55172.
Union Tank Line 55172 was built in 1910 and is a tanker car. It was used to haul liquids such as crude from Farmington, New Mexico and Chama, New Mexico to a refinery in Alamosa, Colorado. It was then renumbered 8164. Then years later, it was then acquired by the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today, and sometimes it is hauled around the museum grounds when trains are operating as well.
What you see right behind me is Union Tank Line 88125.
United Tank Line 88125 was built in 1907 and is a tanker car. It was originally numbered 12770. It was used to haul liquids such as crude from Farmington and Chama, New Mexico to a refinery in Alamosa, Colorado. Later, it was renumbered 88125. Also, during September 1953, the car suffered a derailment in Lobato, New Mexico, and laid on its side on the ground. Then later it was repaired. Then it was retired and it was then acquired by the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today, and sometimes it is hauled around the museum grounds whenever trains are operating as well.
Okay, you can see right here is a wigwag signal that came from Delhi, Colorado. And also this was used along the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, who own signals like these for crossing lights. And also, this one was the last one in service on the BNSF Railroad, who generously gave it to the museum. Then it eventually made its way here, and also it's active. So if you go right here, this is where you'll find the button. Press it, and it will act like so. And bell rings. And that's how it's done. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 0578.
Denver and Rio Grande 0578 was built by the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad Shops in Denver, Colorado in 1886 and is an 8-wheeler bobber caboose. Originally, it was built as a 4-wheel caboose and was originally numbered 94, and it was used on trains in the past on the narrow gauge portion of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and was used as the office for the train crew. Then it was rebuilt in 1918 with trucks and was later renumbered 0578. Then, in 1952, the car was retired and was purchased by the Rocky Mountain Railroad Club. Later, it was acquired by the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is preserved today.
What you see right behind me is Uinta Railway 50.
Uinta Railway 50 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1904 and is a combine car. Originally, this car may have been numbered 1. In 1924, it was renumbered 50, and it has been used on the remote line that ran from Mac, Colorado into eastern Utah for many years. In 1934, it was rebuilt with a rounded roof and steel sheathing. Then, when the railroad was abandoned in 1939, it was then retired and body was sold and was used as a storage shed in Grand Junction, Colorado. Then, years later, it was then acquired by the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and it was soon going under restoration. And then in 2018, it was completely restored, and also it sometimes gets carried around on the museum's tracks and or just stand stationary as well.
What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande B8. Denver and Rio Grande B8 was built by the Jackson and Sharp Car Company in Wilmington, Delaware in 1879 and is a business car. Originally, this coach was built as a baggage car and originally numbered 1. Then in 1888, it was rebuilt to being a business car by the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad in Denver, Colorado, and was renumbered B8 and had served as an office and home for the railroad officials out on the line and used on passenger trains for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad as well. In 1972, it was purchased by the Uinta Railway and had it retaining its original number and used on the remote line from Mac, Colorado into eastern Utah. Then the railroad was abandoned in 1939 and for 20 years it sat in Grand Junction, Colorado after the railroad's abandonment. Then years later it was then acquired by the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and it has been going under some restoration that was starting in 2011 till 2018. And today it can be seen preserved here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it can be seen today. And also, it is considered to being the oldest surviving narrow gauge passenger car in America as well. What you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 6532. Denver and Rio Grande 6532 was built by American Car and Foundry in St. Charles, Missouri in 1940 and is a flat car. This car was originally built as a high-side gondola that was standard gauge, then converted into a flat car later on and was used for many years on the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad narrow gauge line. And when it was a gondola, it might have been used on the standard gauge portion of the Denver and Rio Grande, and when it was a flat car in service on the railroad on freight trains in the past and hauled loads that a flat car like this one may have hauled in the past. Then later on it was retired and it was then acquired by the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, and also it was converted to being a riding car in 2015. People even rode this car until about 5 years later or so. It was converted back to its original configuration. Today, it is preserved here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is today, and sometimes it is carried around on the museum tracks as well. you see right behind me is Denver and Rio Grande 30.
Denver and Rio Grande 3011 was built by Electromotive Division in LaGrange, Illinois in 1962 and is the 272 22nd diesel locomotive built by that factory and is a GP30 type diesel locomotive. This locomotive spent its life working for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad on the standard gauge line and was used to haul freight on the railroad, and it was even used for hauling passenger trains as well. It was even used in the 1973 movie Runaway and was the lead locomotive. Then in 1994 it was then purchased by Omnitrax till it was donated to the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado in 2003. It then sat at the Coors Brewing property and awaited to be moved to the site. Then in 2004 it was then moved to the museum. In 2022 it was being repainted and had a lot of windows and light bulbs screwed that needed to be replaced. Today it is preserved here at the Colorado Railroad Museum in Golden, Colorado, where it is on display today, and also you can even ring the locomotive's bell as well. And unfortunately I do not have a demonstration video of me ringing the bell because around the time I made this video I was unable to get up close to it.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed learning about trains with me today in Matthew Lapp Train Guy segment show. Also, I hope to see you all again in the next segment, and if you didn't subscribe to my channel yet, the subscribe button is just down below the video screen. And if you didn't give the Facebook page a like yet, here's where you'll want to go. And if you didn't give the Instagram page a follow yet, here's where you'll want to go as well. Also, be sure to get your merch at teesprings.com. The link is in the description box below, along with the Facebook and Instagram pages. And as always, remember to subscribe to the Train Guy. So this is Matthew Lapp, host of Matthew Lapp Train Guy segment show, signing out. Until next time, all aboard!